Hi, I'm Dan Richards, and 12 years ago, on the 31st of May 2009, I was involved in a motorcycle accident, and I lost my right arm and my entire shoulder as well.
Hello, and thank you for joining us on The Silent Why. We're your hosts, Claire Sands
and Chris Sands, and we're on a mission to find 101 different types of loss.
In this episode, we meet Dan Richards.
I remember when they said, but unfortunately after 6.5 hours of surgery, you were unable to save your arm and shoulder. I remember looking over to the right side of my body, and sort of where the shoulder should have been was the pillow. There was nothing there.
At the age of 23, Dan had a horrific motorbike crash, which resulted in the amputation of his right arm and shoulder, and the subsequent loss of his military career.
But it wasn't just the loss of the arm that took him to the darkest place he'd ever been. He also had to face the loss of his identity, self-worth and career.
Looking back on that moment now, that's the moment I accepted my situation for what it was, that I'm going to be a man with one arm for the rest of my life. I'm not defined by my injury, I'm not defined by having one arm. I'm defined by how I choose to live my life.
You'll get to hear his story, which takes him from a place of considering suicide to competing at the Invictus Games and starring in Naked Beach on Channel 4. Dan shares his approach to his recovery using goal setting and sheer determination.
We know you'll find his energy as infectious as we did, and there's also some practical chat about cycling with one arm.
Yeah, so I'm Dan, I live in London, and I was once, at one time, in the military. I do a lot of cycling now, and I suppose my military career came to an end after a very bad motorcycle accident shortly after return from Afghanistan, which 3 years afterwards ended my military career. But life's been a bit of a character building exercise since that point up until today, chatting to you guys.
So why don't you tell us what took you into the military? Because that's quite a specific career choice.
The military for me was always a childhood kind of dream, if you like. My father was in the military, so I used to see him going off to work every morning in his uniform, in his military, his combat. When I was 8 years old, I said to Mum and Dad, I said, when I'm old enough, that's what I want to do. I'm going to be like Dad. I'm going to join the army, and I knew exactly who I wanted to be. And so having that direction and goal and determination at a young age, I suppose mental clarity and freedom really to kind of navigate my younger years.
Did it live up to the dream?
Yeah, it did, I think. Yeah, I suppose I joined the military kind of not knowing what I wanted to do. I just wanted to be in the military, so I wasn't really that fussed, if you like, as to what I do in the military. I just wanted to be in the military. It did live up to the dream. I did some pretty cool things with my time in the military.
Small boys across the Western world may have grown up with action man figures, but you obviously had real life action men around you. So you were seeing in reality people jumping out of planes, in driving military vehicles, and obviously that's quite clear. It's quite obvious as to how that becomes infectious. What was the process like of applying and then being selected and finding that you have a place now? You've been welcomed into the military family. What was that process like, and how long did it take?
So the process of joining the military, all in all, took me 18 months, which is a bit longer than I anticipated. So my original plan was to, for argument's sake, was to finish my GCSEs on the Friday and then go and start basic training on the Monday, like literally straight out of school, straight to the military. And so I actually walked out of school at 15. So my birthday's in the summer holidays, so I left school at 15 whilst everyone else was 16. So I actually walked out of school at 15 in the middle of a religious education class, and I walked 3.5-4 miles to the Army Careers Office and just sort of said, I'm finishing school soon, I want to join the army, I want to get the application started now. But I had to get my mum's consent because I was under 16. I actually got in trouble for that. I finished school, I hadn't applied for any colleges, so I went and worked full time at my local Sainsbury's, and I failed selection on the first try on my hearing. I had grommets in and out my ears from a young age, so I spent 18 months having hearing tests done. And on the second time, I met the physical standard, I met the medical standard. On the 4th of April 2003, I went and sort of read my oath of allegiance, left home for the very first time at the ripe old age of 17.
Did it feel young to be leaving and doing all that sort of thing?
I didn't feel young. I suppose, 17 years old, most teenagers at that age kind of think they know everything, don't they? I think the reality of leaving home for the first time was the first thing that kind of shocked me. I'd never been away from home any longer than a weekend, really, up until that point. So, I got homesick to start with, and then you're kind of just thrown in at the deep end of basic training. And the idea of basic training really is to break you down into all just mental games, essentially, and then mould you into the person that they want you to be, so reliable team player. So everything you're used to, sort of pre-basic training, gets thrown out the window. So your mum doesn't live here is kind of what they used to say to you, ironing, making your bed in the morning and stuff, but ironing to a standard which is completely alien, and folding things up, having locker layouts. You have these locker inspections most mornings, and you'd have things folded up, and they'd come in with a piece of A4 paper and the things that are folded up, and they put them next to your shirt. And if they're even if they're like a millimetre out, it's going out the window, it's getting thrown out. I remember thinking at the time, what on earth have I got myself into? But I just thought, no, stick with it. This is what I wanted to do. And essentially, I'm living the dream, innit? So I didn't feel like it at the time. I went off to my regiment. I ended up working with horses. Reason for that, I knew nothing about horses at the time. The reason for horses was kind of something that my dad said, was that, obviously you're joining the military, you're joining the army, make sure whatever you do, you get yourself a trade so that when you come out, you've got something to fall back on. And so I joined the Royal Artillery, and horses was something that the artillery offered as a regiment, so it's called the King Street Royal Horse Artillery. And I just said, what trades are there? They reeled up a few, and they said, farrier. I said, what's a farrier? And they said, a blacksmith. And I was like, say no more. I like the sound of that. I can do that when I leave the military. Did some research into it. Worked out that if I leave the military, whether it's after 4 years, 10 years, or 22 years, I've got a career. I can make quite a bit of money doing it, and I can retire relatively early, having my own business. So the only sort of caveat to that, if you like, was that the regiment I joined, the King's Troop, doesn't deploy on operations, doesn't do any of the Green Army stuff as a regiment. So there are things that I wanted to do, and I wanted to do an operational tour, I wanted to do adventurous training. Personally, I couldn't justify being in the military, and even if only once, never deploying on operations, never doing any Green Army stuff. So I went off to Afghanistan in 2007, came back in sort of the middle of 2008, and then towards the end of 2008, I went off trekking through Nepal in the Himalayas. So up until pre-2009, pre-May 2009, it was looking quite good, my career. I'd done what I wanted to do. I'd let my chain of command know that, I'm in the King's Troop to be a farrier. I've done my sort of prerequisites to the trade that I want to do, and this is the only reason I'm here is to be a farrier. If I can't do that, then I want to be transferred out. And that was accepted. Went off to do Windsor Castle military tattoo, early May 2009, and then we had to get Queen's Birthday Parade out of the way. That's kind of seen as the last sort of major ceremonial parade that goes on. And they said, once we've done Queen's Birthday, or Trooping the Colour as it's also called, once we've finished that, we can get you back into the stable, they call it the lines, to get you back into the stables and sort of work your way towards the forge where the farriers work. And so I was brilliant. Everything's sort of back on path now, and I did a full dress rehearsal of the Queen's Birthday Parade on the 30th of May 2009. Had my dad and my grandma come to watch, and the following day I finished work on the Sunday afternoon, went out on my motorbike, came on the way back to the barracks, woke up 4 days later in hospital with my arm and shoulder amputated, amongst other injuries as well. So I've got no recollection of the accident whatsoever. Don't know how it happened, don't know why it happened. All I know is, after speaking to the police, is that I was going around sort of a long, sharp corner in the outside lane of dual carriageway and slammed the brakes on. Read into that what you want, but I really can't tell you what happened. And there's no cameras of any description to sort of say or show what happened.
So 4 days, from the sounds of it, in a coma or unconscious, and then a whole different story began from that point on. I think things felt like they'd gone according to plan before that, and then that all got thrown out the window. What do you remember about those first few months of accepting what had happened and coming to terms with it?
I was put into the coma in the road by the paramedic, who's now my best man at my wedding. So we're really good friends now, but just the injury load alone was quite severe. He expected me to die on the way to hospital. He's that bad. He just made you comfortable and expected me to pass away on a helicopter on the way to hospital, but wasn't to be, obviously. I don't remember waking up in hospital straight away, but I do remember kind of shortly afterwards. I've got a very sort of vague memory. I mean, I was on all sorts of drugs. I remember the doctor and his registrar came in. They did the whole, Mr. Richards, you've been in a horrific motorcycle accident. You're very lucky to be alive. And when he explained the injury load to me, I kind of, okay, yeah, brilliant. I am. I had 2 broken ankles. My left arm had fixators in it because I'd smashed that to pieces as well. And I'd amputated myself on site. They spent 6.5 hours trying to reattach it. I think after 6.5 hours, they were like, just going to have to amputate it. I think because of lack of blood supply to the limb itself and the damage that was done. So when they amputated, I mean, I did pretty much 95% of the work for them. I think they got the chicken scissors out the drawer and just cut the sinews off, and that was done. I remember when they said, but unfortunately after 6.5 hours of surgery, we were unable to save your arm and shoulder. I remember looking over to, the right side of my body, and sort of where shoulder should have been was the pillow. There was nothing there. And so I got a little bit upset. I mean, that's a massive shock to the system. I was 23 years old at the time. I do remember looking around the room and everyone was obviously upset. I mean, quite a few, my mum and dad were there, and some representatives from the regiment were there. And I remember his registrar, the nurse being there, and I just sort of got her attention. And I just said, is the plumbing still attached and working? And she said, that's absolutely fine. And I said, well, nothing else really matters, does it? There's people worse off than me. And that's what happened. I got a few laughs. Looking back on that moment now, that's the moment I accepted my situation for what it was, that I'm going to be a man with one arm for the rest of my life. At the time, I wasn't thinking, oh, brilliant, this is brilliant, this is nothing, I'm going to get over this. People ask sometimes, like, where do you think I got that mindset from? And I put a lot of it down to being in the military. I mean, you're sort of trained, it's instilled in you in the military to be able to get yourself out of a situation by using your own sort of initiative, if you like, and using what's around you. So you're facing an obstacle, well then find a way of getting over it or going around it. And I suppose with the mind, I just went, there's people worse off than me. There really is, do you know what I mean? And the first goal I ever set was winning my independence back. I mean, they wheeled me into a toilet in a commode because I was non-weight bearer and I couldn't. They said, when you're finished, pull the orange cord and someone will come in and sort of clean you up. And I just went, I'm not having that. Nah, if I can't, sorry to be crude, but I said, if I can't wipe my own arse, but I've got the means to be able to do so, then I need to have a word with myself. And so I spent an hour and a half in the toilet, sort of, getting ready to go back to my ward. I was like, I need my independence back. It's ironic as to how much is involved in being independent, because it's a lot more than writing and tying shoelaces and doing buttons up and eating and stuff. And so I didn't know at the time how important goal setting would become to me later on in life, until definitely years down the line. I'm going to be a man with one arm for the rest of my life now. I was right-hand dominant. I'm now left-handed, not by choice. I just need to start learning stuff left-handed. And I thought, well, being in hospital is kind of the perfect opportunity to do it, because I've got nothing but time here. So in between visiting hours, rather than watch sort of whatever was on the little TV I was to pull down, I'd be learning to write. My hand at the time was in a cast, so I sort of learned I had to become very dexterous with my fingers. I remember they let me out for a few hours with Mum. We went to a shopping centre in an electric wheelchair. Mum went into a bookshop and said, I need an early learning writing book. And the guy goes, yeah, what age is it? She went 23. And what I would do is, between visiting hours, I was doing things like learning to write. My sister got me a pen with a grip on it for left-handed people. And that's even that. How do you hold a pen left-handed? And then once I sort of got a little grasp on writing and holding a pen, I'd be like, right, well, I'm going to write the first 13 letters of the alphabet. And I got it to a point that was legible to me. And I'd write the last half of the alphabet. Then I started writing my name. And so one goal of a massive goal was broken down into small little goals. So, okay, brilliant. Well then, doing buttons. Well, I want to do a shirt up. Well, I'll get so far up. Okay, we'll get halfway up then. And so on. So it's breaking goals down into little goals. And yeah, like I said earlier, I said a minute ago, I never realised how significant and important goal setting will become to me later on in life.
Yeah, can't believe how motivated you were so early. Is that, would you credit that to the military training, or is that just partly your personality as well?
I've always said by default that a lot of how I initially approached and how I still approach things boils down a lot to the military. A bigger percentage of that comes from character. They say, don't they, that character doesn't come from adversity, it reveals it, and I quite believe that.
Obviously, there's a grieving process there. You know, it's a huge loss to wake up and suddenly have one arm when you had two. I'm imagining there was a lot of stuff you just thought, oh, I'll do this. And then there's this sort of, I can't do it because I physically can't do it. Are you as strong emotionally? How does that process work when it comes to coming to terms with it on an emotional level?
Do you know what? I accepted my situation for what it was in hospital. You know, looking back on it now, sort of jumping forward to today, I suppose it was meant to happen. Is the best way of looking at it. And I think accepting that situation for what it is, like you're forced into a changed situation, and accepting that situation and the boundaries, if you like, that I had, I suppose afforded me the mental capacity to work on other things. So, you know, if you look at a problem from a third person perspective, so from the outside looking in, if one thing's in the way, if you're looking at it like face to face, your sole focus will be on that one thing. Whereas if you look at it from a third person perspective, like take yourself out of the situation and look at it as a whole. I mean, I certainly found learning to write again very frustrating. Now I could have, if I wanted to, got really sort of frustrated and off because I couldn't write my name properly. Or what I chose to do was, I'll stop doing that. Right, let's do something else. Let's watch TV or something, or let's read a book or whatever. And then what you find is you go back to doing it, and funnily enough, you'll do it. You'll achieve what you wanted to do initially, but it was too sort of consumed and frustrated to sort of achieve it the first time.
So the wider picture, what have been some of the activities, do you think, that have been among the hardest that you've had to really persist with to learn to do again?
Coming out of the military was probably my toughest challenge. Yeah, so I stayed in the military for 3 years post-accident before I was medically retired, or medically discharged. And, you know, I was looked after by, you know, the military charity Help for Heroes and Blessmas and so on, and the Royal British Legion. There's a whole tally of them, small and big charities that sort of helped me out along the way. But coming out of the military, like no longer being paid to be in the military anymore, was what I found the hardest to deal with. You know, I left my last day in the military was the 20th of September 2012. The 29th of September, I went back home to Somerset and essentially moved back into my room. I was 27 years old at the time, and I just thought, you know, brilliant. I've done in the 3 years I stayed in the military post accident. You know, I'd learnt to rock climb. I'd learnt to ride a horse again. I found out I was never going to be a farrier. You know, I worked that one out for myself, and I just thought, I'm going to have a bit of time to myself, you know, just to unwind, get used to a kind of slower pace of life, if you like, you know. And I think after 2 weeks, got bored, started applying for jobs, and by August of 2013, I couldn't get a job. No one would offer me a job. I had 327 job applications, of which not one led to anything sub-basic, nothing at all. I probably had about 5 replies that said I've got the skills or experiences that we require. And I was applying for jobs as a cleaner at one point because I was living on my savings. And by August, the beginning of August, I remember I had to reinsure my car, and my card had declined. And you know, I had all this money. 10 years in the military, it's a perfect opportunity to save money. I had 15 pence to my name, and what I didn't know at the time was that I was depressed, and I was very much reclusive as well. And my mum and stepdad went out to work one morning, and no sooner they left, after about half an hour of them leaving, I tried to hang myself. I was like, what have I really got to look forward to? You get knocked back so many times. I was just like, I've got, if this is what life's got in store for me, like after what I've been through and kind of accepted and moved on and accepted as part of my life, if this is what life's got in store for me, I'd really rather not be part of it. I've been through enough. And I got halfway through doing it, so I stopped. I said, what's Mum going to do when she finds me? And I started, I just sort of said to myself, I need help. I need to get back to London. And I think what that was, the loss of the career, but I lost a career. I've lost my self-worth, my identity, which I kind of worked towards from about 8 years old. And I just felt like I was a drain on society. I was like, I'm living in essentially my old room as a 27-year-old man. Most people my age at 27 are getting well established in their careers. They're probably settling down with, starting their own families, probably on the housing ladder by now as well. And I'm living. I've got no money. I've got no job. I can't get a job, and I live in my old room essentially with Mum and Dad. What have I really got to look forward to? That was kind of my rock bottom. Became the foundations of which I've rebuilt everything from scratch, from the ground up. And ironically, after that, I was offered a job as a chauffeur in London with a startup company. They were called Capstar at the time. But I had no money to move back to London, so I ended up living in a caravan. This caravan, it was awful. The roof leaked. It was it was borderline being homeless, but it was my home. This is how bad it got, actually, and I wouldn't change any of this either. I think the worst it got was 2 weeks before the end of the month. So halfway through the month, waiting for the next payday to come, I didn't have enough money to go shopping. So I would go to the corner shop and I would live on custard cream biscuits and cups of tea, because I just figured, you know what? Half a packet of biscuits for breakfast, lunch and dinner is going to keep me full until next time. And that, it's a very unhealthy way to live, but beggars can't be choosers. So what's ironic about this is I took the car home that I was chauffeuring in, which was an estate Jaguar, an XJL. Sometimes it was a Range Rover, sometimes it was a Bentley. And I'm living in a caravan out, just in between Windsor and Heathrow, living on custard creams. Winter, I couldn't afford the gas to keep the fire on, so I was going to bed fully clothed in an old army sleeping bag and my duvet pulled over me. And I found, that I was working 7 days a week to stay out of my caravan and spend time in the car. But the people that I was driving and in the back of my car, some of the world's most successful people, celebrities at one point, at certain occasions, like award ceremonies, and then I was one of 8 drivers at the time in the company that was seconded to the Royal Mews, so I was driving diplomats and all that around. It's like yin and yang, living completely destitute and poor, driving the rich and famous around. But I think in 2014, I was like, what's making these people tick? Like, what's giving them their get up and go? Because it's clearly working for them. And if it's working for them, it can work for me. And so I would cherry pick kind of personality attributes, well, they do this on a morning. Because I knew what these people were doing. Like, I'd have to pick them up and take them to the gym or something, or they were going to be at the gym and then drive to the city at this time. I was like, well, that's what they're doing. I'll do that. I'll get up early then. I'll go for a walk around or go for a run if I can before I need to be at work. And then just through doing that, I kind of had a bit of an epiphany. And I just went, do you know what? Any opportunity I get, I don't care what it is. I'm just going to say yes. Like, whether I can do it or not is irrelevant. I'm just going to say yes, because you never know what I'm going to need to. And so from 2014, I qualified as a scuba diver in Egypt with a great charity actually called Debt Therapy. And I learned to fly a plane with an order called Airability. I gave wing walking a go. And then sort of towards the end of 2014, an opportunity had come around with an organisation called Row to Recovery. And they were putting together the world's first all-disabled crew to row unsupported 3,000 miles across the Atlantic Ocean. I went, yeah, go on then. Why not? I threw myself into rowing. I knew nothing about rowing other than what you see on the TV. So I remember sort of looking on the internet, like how the Olympic rowers train. So I would fit into my weekly routine when I finished chauffeuring, or if I've got a gap in my chauffeuring, I'm going to the gym and I'm going to spend 2 hours on the ergonomic rowers non-stop. because that's what the routine was for the row. And I was tearing my hand to shreds and then going to work covered in plasters and blisters and so on. And I got to the final 5, of which 4 were chosen, and I wasn't one of the 4. I did my final selection with 3 of the selected 4 crew. That one thing, even though I was unsuccessful, became my greatest achievement, because fundamentally I learned more about myself and what I'm capable of. In spite of what external factors were facing me. A lot of people would say, "What's the point? You've got one arm, you're never going to get it." Are you having a laugh? It's like, do you know what? This is what I'm doing in my life. That's so, what you do with yours is so fantastic, because I'm dying to know, like, what you're doing. And they all go quiet. And literally off the back of that phone call, you've unfortunately not been selected. I just went, in the next breath, I went, well, I need something else to do then. And I had a bike. I had a push bike. And I got on this bike and I bought a cheap and nasty little indoor turbo trainer, because I'd never been out on a bike with one arm, like outside with one arm. And so I couldn't afford any of the fancy stuff. But the internet was free, Google was free, YouTube's free, like training, like not for anything in particular. And then a ride came up called the London Night Rider, and the charity that took me skiing, rebranded to Supporting Wounded Veterans, took me to Switzerland for a free holiday to learn to ski. And they had tickets for this ride. I thought, you know what, you took me on a free holiday, I'll give some. I always believe in giving back whenever you have the opportunity to do so. So I'll raise some money, for the next lot of veterans that are coming through. Did the London Night Rider. I also got a spot on another bike ride. And the plan for the 2 bike rides was, well, I'll finish the London Night Rider this weekend. And this other bike ride across France, that's the weekend after. The Night Rider started on the Saturday night. The Friday before, it kind of hit home that this ride across France wasn't the weekend after. It was the Monday after the Night Rider finished. So I went, do you know what? This will make a good story somewhere down the line. This will be my introduction to cycling. And so I just trained and I trained and I trained. And I did both rides. I got to the end of France. I'd never watched the Tour de France. And every time I'd ever been to France, in a car or a bus or whatever, you can see for miles because it's pan flat. And I was like, yeah, it's fine. If anyone ever tells you France is flat, they're lying, right? But I remember all the hills that I went up in France. I was like, you know what, I can get off and walk if I want to. And there'll be a nice view at the top. I'll see for miles. It'll be a lovely view. But I wouldn't have earned it. I wouldn't have achieved it. And so that lesson I got a lesson from the row was, there's no shame in giving up. But running parallel with that, there's no success in it either. And you don't have to win everything to be successful. And actually, I've learned more from my failures in life than I have from any of my successes. That when I got to the end of France, we got to the end of like 400 miles later, the sense of achievement that I got out of doing that, I said, I'm going to be a cyclist. Like, what can I do in cycling? That's something to write home about. And Invictus Games 2018, let's go. And yeah, I then also just moved into this flat, like in South London where I live now. So that goal of getting back to London kind of came to fruition as well. And that took me 4 years. I couldn't afford the fancy kit still. I couldn't afford these flash turbo trainers, a Zwift membership, a coach, a nutritionist, all that stuff. But, one thing that's always been and always will be free is the internet, a bit of drive and determination as well to compete at the Invictus Games. And that became a 2-year goal. And I just broke it down into so-and-so. And I started using Instagram, actually, to track my cycling, sort of my progress, if you like, to put pictures on and stuff. With no intention of it leading anywhere. I just, to be honest, I got contacted by an organisation called Zebedee Management, who are a modelling agency, and did some pictures, and then they offered me a modelling contract. So whilst I'm working towards the Invictus Games, I get signed by a modelling agency that represents sort of the marginalised within media, fashion, and sort of everything that magnetised towards that kind of industry. And my first job was a Lloyds Bank TV commercial. That led to Naked Beach. It's 2018 now, I'm still training for the games. And then I remember, literally they're a day apart, I got the phone call from the TV production company that, congratulations, Channel 4 would like to cast you for Naked Beach. And then the following day I got the email saying, congratulations, you've been selected for the Invictus Games. 2018 was a very much pinch me year. So for me, the Invictus Games in Sydney, that was my line in the sand. And I knew I needed to not turn my back on or disassociate myself with the military, but I think if you look at your life like a book, every chapter has to come to an end before you can start reading or writing the next. And it was kind of an epiphany, if you like, I had whilst watching, of all things, Only Fools and Horses. I went, I don't want to be an Uncle Albert. I don't want every single story about my life, certainly when I get towards the end of it, to be during the war, when I was in the army, back in my day. I don't want to be just known as Dan Richards, the guy that was in the military. No, I was in the military. It's contributed enormously to my life, and it's given me a lot, core values to live by, and so on. But the army, the military, doesn't pay my bills anymore. It doesn't contribute to my life anymore. And I'm a big believer in that. What doesn't contribute to your life, whether it's a thing or someone, if it doesn't contribute to your life positively, then why should you be part of it? So my line in the sand was the Invictus Games, and I thought that was a perfect opportunity to represent my country as a member of the military, one final time on an international platform, to then focus on the rest of my life in the next chapters that I'm going to write. The games, I didn't win any medals at the games, and that's not why I went. I went to the games to end a chapter, but also because I wanted ownership of that piece of work of my life, so the training. If I apply myself to something, can I achieve it? Yes, I can. Brilliant. Okay, I've done it. And that's what the games for me were. So the games was in October, so I went off to Mykonos in Greece, filmed Naked Beach for 5 weeks. Whilst I was there, there was a busy filming schedule. I went, I love this. This is what I want to do. How the hell am I going to do this? Because I know nothing about this industry, but I don't care. I'm just gonna throw myself into it. Came back from Greece, was made redundant from my full-time job. I just went, you know what? I'm going to take that as an opportunity. I'm going to take a year off. I'm going to throw myself into the industry. If it becomes an overnight success or a career, brilliant. But I use that year to kind of build up the experience, bridge a gap without a full-time commitment. I worked in the coffee shop at weekends. When I wasn't working at the coffee shop, I was out training on YouTube and Google. I was earning peanuts at the coffee shop. I'd signed on. I was on benefits. I was single as well, and so I had nothing kind of interfering with what I was working on myself, really, without any sort of external factors. Did the Invictus Games in October, came back, got offered my job, which I do now, my full-time job I do now, which is sort of project management, sort of IT, and I'm still doing the modelling on the side, which is quite good. So I'm kind of like juggling a lot of things. Do you know what I mean? So
to be doing something like Naked Beach and then Invictus Games and then working in a coffee shop, I can't imagine a more varied life than that, really.
Just explain briefly what Naked Beach is as well.
So Naked Beach kind of began life as a social experiment conducted by a man called Dr. Keon West, together with a lady called Natasha Devon, who found that people with a low opinion of themselves, and there was 3 factors, and it was life satisfaction, self-esteem, and body image. And these people, in this initial experiment, when they're put around normal, air quotes there, bodies, their kind of preconceived misconception of what perfect is lowers their barriers, and they're able to address their demons. And yeah, that's what Naked Beach was, and it was just kind of to show that this research does actually work.
I really loved that program. Was it as rewarding for you guys as hosts as it was for those that were on it?
Rewarding, yeah. It was extremely rewarding for me as a person. So every week we had 3 guests come out to Mykonos where we filmed it, and the villa was done at like a retreat, if you like. So we were the hosts that were running the retreat. We did activities through each week. It was very rewarding and eye-opening to see the changes in the guests. And I was very new to the body confidence scene at the time. I didn't even know it was a thing. At best, I thought it was something that only women deal with, because you only ever heard women talking about it. Yeah, seeing the changes from when we first met the guests at the poolside to seeing them at the end when they left in such a short amount of time, without actually doing anything to them other than showing them that perfect doesn't exist. Like, what you see on social media isn't perfect. There's no perfect image. Seeing that change is really rewarding. I actually learned quite a bit about myself, my own image, if you like, for it. I'd obviously come to terms with my own image and accepting it before that. I suppose I got that through cycling. It was a very, very rewarding experience, but I made friends for life out of that, guests and hosts.
Had you, by that stage, or did you ever have to kind of work through a journey of fully accepting the change in your body when you lost your arm?
Yeah, do you know what? So I remember, underneath here, so that's my prosthetic, underneath that, there's nothing. So a quarter of my body is gone. So I've got no shoulder whatsoever. I've got about 2 inches of a collarbone left and a quarter of my shoulder blade. So I can count all my ribs up on my right hand side, right up to the top of the bottom of my neck. I used to compare myself to other men, certainly sort of men that had muscles, big chests and so on. And I'd want to be that. I wanted to be that when I had both my arms. No matter how far advanced medical science gets, I would never get that ever. And so, because I couldn't have that, I would have such a low opinion of myself that I would wear clothes that were too big for me to hide the outline of a prosthetic. I used to wear a prosthetic arm. I don't anymore. I've not done for 3 or 4 years now. But that prosthetic arm I used to hide behind because people would stare. So I thought I'd give them something to stare at. So I used to wear this all singing and dancing prosthetic hand, which is pretty good, but I couldn't actually use properly. And wearing a prosthetic as well, because so much is missing, I don't have an anchor point. So if I had a residual limb, I could just put my limb into the socket and I still got the movement of, say, a shoulder. But because so much is missing, the prosthetic itself is made bigger underneath, so to spread the weight out. So I had a pack horse underneath my clothes. And I remember summer, I used to hate summer because within the first 5 minutes of walking out the door, I'd be sweating. I'd sweat through my clothes. And if I was going to work on the tube, by the time I got off the tube, my shirt looked like I'd run to work. But then I got to sit like that for 8 hours. So I'd be stinking before I even got home. I used to hate it. If I didn't wear the arm, I would wear clothes, t-shirts and jumpers and so on that were too big to hide the outline of my prosthetic because it's not real, it's not mine. Because of that, because it was too big, because I've only got a little stump, the jumper wouldn't fit, or the t-shirt wouldn't fit because the armpit of the t-shirt would overhang. So then I just looked like a sack of potatoes. So I had a low opinion when it came to wearing clothes as well. So I had a low opinion naked. I had a low opinion of myself fully clothed, and I was like, I just can't bloody win. And in the end, I went to a beach, and I just went, you know what? I had a hoodie on at the beach, took that off, looking around, no one was looking. So I took the t-shirt off and the prosthetic off. No one was looking. I went into the sea, and it was just so, what's the word?
Releasing.
There you go. I just felt free. And then actually, somebody came up to me as I was coming out of the sea, and they were like, "Do you know what? Fair play to you, mate. I mean, a lot of people wouldn't take their t-shirt off or top off or anything, and you're taking your prosthetic off and all sorts, getting it and just living life." The person didn't know that was the first time I'd ever done it, but it kind of solidified for me, really, that no one actually really cares. It looks a bit strange. People are asked, and if anything, they're going to ask questions. Perfect icebreaker. And then from that moment on, I was like, do you know what? I don't need the prosthetic arm. So it sat under my bed for 2 years. I took it back to my prosthetics and I said, look, this hand is £10,000 brand new, right? I was very fortunate to get it because I'm used to being in the military, so I've had help to get it. I said, look, if there's somebody less fortunate that can't afford, give it to them. Let them have it. But they can't do that prosthetics. It's like, if you take it back, you can't really give them to other people, can you? So, and they use it as a model that people can take away and use and see if they get on with it and so on. And that's kind of how I kind of come to terms with my image. I just thought confidence was confidence. You can go into the room and, yeah, all right, guys and girls. I thought that was confidence. I just thought confidence was that. There's so many different layers to confidence. Body confidence, social confidence, and there's all the other confidences that are out there. I had a name, and I've always said if you can put a name to something, you can own it. And I suppose in a roundabout way, I was able to kind of address my demons.
I want to ask you a question, but just a few quick-fire thoughts on my mind. I'm wondering, when we talk about the cycling, because I cycle and very much take for granted having two arms. When you're cycling, how do you signal right?
Do you know what? If it's safe to do so, I take my hand off the handlebars, and I just put my hand behind me, let cars know. Otherwise, rode horses for 10 years. So.
And do you have a bike specially designed for, so a left-hand brake will affect both tyres? Because obviously on just a standard bike, the right hand brake will brake the front tire. And so have you got a special bike setup to be able to bring it to a stop?
So the bike's not specially made; it's off the shelf. Before I've got an adaptation, but before that, I moved. What I did in the bike shop did, but moved the right hand lever onto the left hand drop bar. So on a racing bike, on a road bike where the handlebars curl round, a bit at the bottom's a drop bar, and I moved it around there. But it just meant that if I needed an emergency stop, I had more leverage of the back brake than the front. So I used to put them both together. But I mean, your little finger or your last two fingers on your hand aren't really that strong. So if I needed to emergency stop, which luckily I never had to, just jump off.
Well, I was going to say, even with your motorcycle training, back before the accident, you would have been trained in percentages of braking front and rear, different circumstances. Going around corners, a bit more rear, a bit less front.
The way my bike works now, the brakes and the gears, the way the brakes work now, I've got an adaptation called a problem solver. It's essentially it's a cable splitter. Like one cable goes into the adaptation, two comes out, and it sounds a lot more technical than it is, but it pulls the back brake fractionally quicker than the front. So essentially it's like 70-30. And that's how it works. And the gears are electronic. So I've got what's called DI2. It's made by Shimano. And that's set up for something they've got called synchro shift. So essentially it's like a semi-automatic car for ease of conversation. So I control the cassette on the back wheel, so up and down. And then once the chain goes so far down the sprockets on the back wheel, it's set up to change gears at the front. So the chain rings at the front. The front derailleur will automatically kick up and down, vice versa, depending on where I am.
Yeah, I think I understand it. Claire's probably thinking,
I'm just politely nodding.
I'm lost. A few times you've mentioned help. Have you found the help from others that you've needed to be part of this journey, do you think? Or has it mostly been you finding the answers out yourself?
Yeah, do you know what? Help is out there, but I think fundamentally, before anyone else can help you, you need to be willing to help yourself. Like, if you're not willing to help yourself, then the greatest help in the world is of no benefit to you whatsoever. It's just empty words and actions, isn't it? So I suppose the things that I've done, they've all become, I suppose, mentors, if you like. A mentor won't give you the answers of what needs to be done, but they'll give you things and they'll say things to you, and you'll kind of in your own mind work out what needs to be done to achieve an outcome. I'm not self-made at all whatsoever. I've had lots of help from other people and other organisations. To ask for help when you know you need help, I think that's courage, that's brave, because you're vulnerable. And I think there's nothing more courageous, nothing more masculine than asking for help when you need it. And actually losing the arm and shoulder, I suppose, is a gift, isn't it, really? I look at it as a gift, the best thing that happened to me. So, because I've done more of my life like this had it never happened.
Something I'm just wondering, did you ever at any point ask the question why? Why me? Why now? Why this? Why this arm? Was that ever a question that factored into your thinking?
At first, yeah, like, why me? Like, why has this happened to me? But I suppose looking back on it now, why me? Why not me? And that's kind of how I look at anything. I've the arm and the shoulder, like, coming off has afforded me opportunities and experiences, and I've done things, and it's realigned my life and how I choose to live it. And I think that's the key word there, how I choose to live it. And that's completely undefined. I might do things differently to somebody else. It doesn't mean it's wrong. So at first, yeah, like, why me? Like, why has this happened to me? What have I done to deserve this? And I think, that's kind of a precursor to a negative mindset, I think. Like, why me? Why am I the victim here? I really don't want to live in a victimhood kind of mindset and so on. So, like, I'm not defined by my injury. I'm not defined by having one arm. I'm defined by how I choose to live my life and how I live my life in spite of what's happened to me.
We ask all of our guests a bit of a strange question, but it just taps into elements, and some of this will be just summarising again some of your key points, your key learnings. But the question that I'll ask is what's your Herman?
My Herman? I suppose you can't wait until life isn't hard anymore before you decide to be happy. Yes, if you lost your arm or your leg last week, it's not the end of the world. And I always said from the off, there's people worse off than me. I don't live with cancer. I don't live with a terminal illness. I don't live in poverty. I don't live in a war-torn country. I've got running hot water. I've got a family. There's so many things and factors that could be completely different to me that will define kind of my quality of life. You can't wait until life isn't hard anymore before you decide to be happy. I guess life will beat you up, but you still got dreams, right? So that's my Herman cake. Yeah.
We think the quote that Dan mentioned earlier sums him up so well. Adversity doesn't build character, it reveals it.
We're really grateful to Dan for his honesty and his willingness to bare his soul in this way. You can follow his adventures on Instagram. Search for @TheOneArmedWonder.
Thank you for listening to The Silent Why. We'll be releasing another episode next week on a different topic of loss, and if you haven't checked out our previous episodes, go and have a listen to those. We've done one on the loss of a marriage, the loss of parents to dementia, and our own story on childlessness and losing something that you never really had in the first place.
You can find out all about this and more on thesilentwhy.com or on social media by searching for @TheSilentWhyPod.
We want to finish with a quote that sums up many people who have faced adversity and come out stronger. They are the words of Khalil Gibran, a Lebanese-American poet. Out of suffering have emerged the strongest souls. The most massive characters are seared with scars.